Welcome to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, founder and managing director of The Sales Doctor. I'm joined today by Jason Tunbridge. He is the co-founder and CEO of the leadership think tank. He has a lifetime of experience in the SME marketplace. He's mixed with some of Australia's most innovative entrepreneurs and has unique insights into the right and wrong ways to plan an organisation's strategic direction and enhance a leader's professional skills. Jason's career has not been linear. He's enjoyed cameo interactions with Kerry Packer, Robert Holmes à Court, and the Dalai Lama. Life has taught him to think on his feet, to embrace grit and gratitude, and approach each person he encounters as an opportunity to engage and enhance them. Without a benefactor to sponsor Jason's career as a professional mountaineer, he returned to senior management and executive roles across a number of industries. Jason's ambition is to have a positive impact on as many people and businesses as he possibly can. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. It's great to be here.
It certainly is from my perspective. Let's dive right in because you have an absolutely fascinating journey career-wise. You started your working life in a boat marina on Sydney's northern beaches, which is, in my opinion, God's country, before attending film school and working as a camera operator and film editor. How has every role that you've undertaken opened the doorway to where you are now as co-founder and director of the leadership think tank, which has just celebrated 10 years, but kind of 11 years?
Yeah, that's true. Kind of 11. Yeah. Well, goodness, you've done your research. So I did have my very first job at a marina on Pittwater in Sydney. Sometimes I wish I still had that job. It was every Sunday, $2 an hour plus lunch. And I think I was in year 11 at school, and my job was to look after the hire boats and pump fuel and operate the tender and take people out to their moorings, serve in the shop, all those sorts of things. It was I would have done it for free, just quietly. But $2 an hour was pretty enticing in those days. One of the things I guess it taught me was be prepared to think on your feet, because I had little to no training and there was an expectation that turning up was good enough. And so no one taught me how to pump fuel, for instance, into a car. No one taught me how to top up oil. No one taught me how to drive the boats. There was just this assumption that you could learn that, and you'll learn it by watching it and seeing someone else do it, and off you go, champ. It was a great introduction into, I suppose, the adult world of working that enabled me to think, you know what, if it's going to happen, I will just get into it and I'll make it up as I go along, and eventually I will become adept at doing what I'm doing. And I think on reflection, maybe that's kind of been the way that my career has developed. It's been like, I think I can do that. And then you keep doing it until you can.
Well, not just until you can, because you've actually got some deep and rich skill sets there. I really appreciated just one of the insights that you talked about there, which was about, trusting others to learn. So, okay, so that's where you started, but let's kind of go along the journey and see how each role might have kind of given you skills for the one to come, and how you've continued to build out a really broad base of skill sets and experience sets.
Sure. After school, I worked for an ad agency for a period of time, which was like the world's most conservative advertising agency in the world. It was all about newspaper classifieds, and I wasn't really aware of that when I joined. They had a creative department of 3 and an accounts department of about 17. So I also learned that you've got to be careful, do your research on the places you want to work. So I was there for a period of time, went to university, decided university wasn't for me, and swapped over to film school, which I think was probably the best decision I made from my career, certainly in those early days, because it I guess it gave me that kind of opportunity to express my creative sense in a way that I hadn't had previously. And what I learnt through going to film school and learning the techniques of camera operating and editing and so on was really how to, bring narratives together in a way that I'd never really understood. And, I'm talking about the days when film editors, it wasn't digital at all. We had film and we were cutting it and we were using sticky tape to put it back together. And we're making decisions based on 1/24th of a second of which frame we would use or cut. And I think that kind of discipline really focused on being able to express what you were doing creatively. What that enabled me to do in the jobs that came after that is I picked up my first video production manager role at the age of 21, and I worked when I moved over to Perth for a couple of years, and worked over there. And again, it was a little bit like, you better make it up on the go. I got hired pretty much on I think the owner's hope that I could do the job. I certainly gave him confidence during the job interview. Yeah. I remember being very confident in that point, and on day one I had to remember how to turn the machines on and kind of worked my way through it. Life has been a little bit like that as you graduate your career. I think that for me there's been, you've got opportunities in front of you. Let's take them, and we'll sort the rest out as we go. We'll kind of learn on the job in many ways, and maybe that's the kind of, I suppose, the entrepreneurial bit in me that got hatched at that particular time. And when I moved back to Sydney when I was in my mid-20s and had a young family. I couldn't go back into the film world because the investment laws had changed by the government. There was a 150% tax deduction you could get if you invested in film, and that got wiped out. And so I pretty much had to find a job pretty quickly. And I ended up working with an importer on leather goods, and I became their sales manager. And we started designing things for corporates, and in many ways, we made that up as we went along as well. But that particular role, when it comes to sales, there was a little bit of old school sales training, which was, here's the yellow pages, champ. Start at A, and that's what we want you to go through. Look for the companies that are the big ones. Even things like driving around places in Sydney, around North Ryde and so on, where the pharmaceutical companies are, looking where they're looking at who had their names on the buildings and going back and doing some research and approaching those. So, yeah, I feel like I learnt a lot of my sales trade, kind of on the go. But as you kind of get success along the way and you get some good feedback, you think, oh, actually, now I can build upon what I'm doing and maybe get some more sophistication around what I'm doing. And that's been a lifelong passion of mine in any case, to kind of get better at what you do if you just keep sticking at it and doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that strikes me here is that theme of really backing yourself and knowing that you're going to figure it out. And not only that you're going to figure it out, but that you're really going to become, expert at that new skill or at that new role or at that new experience, regardless of what it is. And I really, as you're talking about how you did your research to find, new leads for your pipeline as, in that sales management role, driving around, using the yellow pages. I mean, they're things that perhaps many of the listeners can't relate to. You may be the driving around, perhaps, but certainly the yellow pages, people might even be asking, what's the yellow pages?
What's that old man talking about?
and the old lady who's nodding her head there. But They were the ways in which, people in sales, particularly B2B, would have to go about generating, opportunities for themselves. But what that actually gave people was a real discipline in picking up the phone, engaging with people, thinking about their approach, making it relevant because you only had 10 seconds to get that, that engagement and a the permission to continue to talk to somebody. So I really appreciate you giving us, that little bit of insight. Tell me
Sure.
this though, Jason, what kind of led you into the leadership think tank? So
Yeah.
take us from that sales manager role now into the journey that's taken you to where you are now.
Yeah. Look, I think I think I've always wanted to. I've got an altruistic streak, so part of my DNA is I've always tried to benefit people that I'm interacting with, and I think in that, like, if I think about those sales roles that I had early on, it was all about trying to solve a problem for the people who I was dealing with, and if I couldn't solve the problem, I would find out someone who could, and I'd refer them on. And I think those kinds of things within maybe my personality and the opportunities that I had, I realized pretty early on that if you could influence people who were leading organizations, then you could influence the organizations as a whole. I used to meet with people who were like direct reports into CEOs, and they would be frustrated about certain things within their organization and, maybe the direction they were going, or the CEO wasn't paying attention to what the suggestions were. And, a number of roles during my career, there were times when you would make recommendations into the leadership that, I thought was going to be really significant. And sometimes it was, thanks for the input, but back in your box and just get on with what you're doing. I'll come up with all the good ideas. And maybe in life, that's okay if that's something that you are happy to do. But for me, there was that wasn't going to sit for a long period of time. So the opportunity came a number of years ago, just over 10 years ago, 11 years ago, to look at the leadership think tank. And so it's not a unique idea. The idea is to get smart people together to share ideas and opportunities and challenges and help each other come to the best decisions. And if I think about the premise of what our business does, which is all about trying to make someone who's running a business be the best that they can be, and consequently that their business can be the best they can be, it's the end result of all the work and the people I've dealt with and the decisions I've made and the experiences I've had, both good and bad. But I'm an end product of what I've been through an entrepreneurial kind of non-linear career path. And now I've got the opportunity to work with really, honestly, people way cleverer than I could ever hope to be. And I get to work with them on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and learn from them, and in turn take out what I learned from them and help other CEOs and businesses. So I feel like there's a real cross-pollination, and maybe I feel like a bit of a fulcrum in between what I learned from some of our CEO members that I can then pass on to other CEO members who may not come across them in their normal day.
Yeah, there are a few things that you just said there that I just want to come back to a little bit, because I think that the discipline of selling gives us so much of a strong basis for going off, and then if you happen to have that entrepreneurial streak, which you clearly did from a very young age, I think that that's been my path too, for the last 25 years. But you talked about, a love of solving problems. You talked about that altruistic streak. And this is something I really want to pick up on, because when it comes to selling, people who aren't necessarily thinking about it the same way that you and I do can think that it's really about convincing and persuading other people. They don't see it as something that's an act of giving. They don't see it as something that is requiring us to be of service to others. So can you just pull apart that view of your experience in selling and how that relates to the leadership think tank and its connection to altruism.
Oh, well, there's so much to unpack there. Look, selling, no one likes to get sold to. You don't, I don't, I'm sure anyone listening to this podcast hates being sold to. And it's something that I think sometimes in business and commerce, people are aggressive in the way that they sell. They're trying to persuade people to buy, which is, for mine, just completely unethical and nothing that I would ever subscribe to. And I've always wanted to have an opportunity to help people. And as a result, when it comes to things like selling, and whether it's product or experience, or, even if you think about selling more as a transaction of information or product, or selling ideas, there's all sorts of ways that you could look at it. I always want to be able to solve someone's problem, and if I can't solve their problem, if I can't provide for them what they want, I'm going to refer them on to Ingrid, who I know can. And I may not get any recompense for that. I might not get any reward. However, internally, my altruistic bone gets completely excited by the fact that I've been able to help these two people get together. One of my greatest joys is when I am able to connect someone to someone else and solve both their problems. That for me is one of the highlights of my professional career. I love doing things like that. And when it comes to things like selling, I've always known that if I can't, or I shouldn't, I could provide something to somebody, but I may not be the best result for them, or the best product, or the best person even. I will always refer them on to someone else. And I've had that, I think that kind of ethos, that paying forward, it's good, it may or may not be good for me, but it's going to be better for you. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. And that has been an opportunity for me to think about when we build the leadership think tank and the groups that we get and the members and the chairs and the speakers. I always want it to be good for other people, because if we are a customer-led organisation, then the revenue and the profits and everyone will look after itself, right? So it's not me dictating what is the best. I may have an opinion, but it's never me dictating what should happen. And it's always about what's going to be the best result for the customer in place.
Yeah. I don't think you can go wrong when you have that customer-led philosophy, that customer-led approach to any kind of business. I think that the other thing that you mentioned here, and again, it extends into where you are now. It seems to me that, your idea about the leadership think tank and what you're wanting to leave as a legacy in the world through it, and through the people that are in it, contains some of the sum total of all of the things that you've been able to pick up along the way. But one thing that you mentioned that I think is one of the privileges of being in sales is about cultivating a really strong and deep and wide network around you, so that you can actually be instrumental in solving problems regardless of whether you're going to personally benefit or not. It's really about, and again, that comes back to your altruistic streak towards customers. I really resonate with that philosophy. Really.
Yeah, I think it's vital. I mean, if you're not thinking about how you can positively influence somebody else, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. Okay. So you talked here about, really wanting to support, business owners. You talked about wanting to support, in particular, Australian business owners and creators. What is it about celebrating them and supporting them that's important to you?
I think there's an ethical obligation for people who can support and improve and lift up business owners, particularly the SME marketplace. Like, the SMEs are the backbone of the Australian economy. And for me, if we are if through what we do and the peer mentoring that we do and the connections that we can make, and if we can positively influence somebody who's running a business, and they may be employing 10 people, they may be employing 100 people, they may be employing many, many more. But if we can positively influence the leader, then the benefits for that organisation, for their clients, for their customers, their suppliers, their staff, the communities that they walk around, that ripple effect that goes out through the Australian economy is going to be incredible. Like if you can make sure that any business itself is being run with the best intentions and the best leadership, with a very positive culture, then you can see those benefits transcend throughout the economy. And I think that is the main reason that the leadership think tank was born. I mean, we're not a unique idea, but the way that we put the model together and the ideas behind it, and I think even the ethos and the culture of what we've developed is really about being receptive to the people who are running businesses, being receptive to what their needs are, being nimble enough to make changes, or nimble enough to address concerns, or nimble enough to come through with some different ideas in a way that will be beneficial for all of them. Because at the end of the day, if I have left a legacy of people who have done better in their business, and as a result their families have been better and everything else, then from an intellectual and emotional perspective, and there's a satisfaction there that can't be replicated. I've always thought that my own success or otherwise will be determined by the work that I can do by influencing other people. It's not always about financial return. It's not always about financial risk. It's often about, have you made somebody else's day today better? Have you made their situation better? Have you introduced them to a new idea? Have you introduced them to someone who could help them? And if you can push that kind of mentality and ethos into common usage and throughout the marketplace, then wouldn't that be a great society that we're living within?
I knew there was a reason we met. I really, really resonate with your whole perspective about that. So when we think about Australian small businesses, for example, the important role that they play in the success of Australia's economy, they're facing a number of challenges at the moment. So I wondered if you could just talk us through a little bit more and unpack for us, the approach that the Leadership Think Tank has in its methodology with those small business owners. And you're talking about influencing those leaders in order to influence their organisations. But tell me what you're hearing at the moment, the challenges that they're facing, and how your specific approach at the Leadership Think Tank helps them deal with those challenges.
Yeah, look, it's such a unique time. 2024, I think when you and I were speaking earlier in the week, and just the tumult that the world has been through, even in the last 5 years, let alone the last 15. The challenges are in many ways front of mind. The economy. I mean, there is a trepidation about the way the economy is going. There is a trepidation in the staff shortage. It's in many ways the attraction and the retention of really key people is still the focus, as it has been for a number of years. I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. For those who may be like me in the second half of their career, who can remember when unemployment rates were in double digits, that at the moment there is no reason any talented person should be out of work for a period of time longer than 4 to 6 weeks, right? Unless they really want to. So there is the talent shortage, the economy. I think the changes in technology, which has been, well, everybody knows the changes in technology have been remarkable, and the impact that artificial intelligence will also have with the introductions of ChatGPT and how that's evolving now at an alarming rate. We haven't really thought about the implications of what that might end up looking like, but the genie's out of the bottle. We'll have to deal with it. So there are all these kind of competing things for organisations to deal with. How we help with that is that we provide a forum where CEOs from different industries, often with the same challenges, can get together in a confidential forum and talk about these things. Talk about them in a safe way. Talk about them in an encouraging way sometimes. When you hear about what someone who's leading an organisation in a completely different industry to you is doing, and it might be a technology that they're adapting, or it might be a way they're interacting with their team, or some retention strategy they've got, and you're in a different industry and you would never have come across them in a normal day's work. But that cross-pollination of ideas is really, for us, it's almost like a melting pot. Who's got some great ideas? Who's got some experience on how we've been dealing with things, that we could do things better? So I guess the leadership think tank is an opportunity for people to bring their really great ideas, bring their really great challenges, throw them all in together, have that beautiful mix of wisdom and experience, do its magic. And for people at the end of the meeting, when they get together and they can go back with ideas on how to solve problems they're dealing with, practical ideas, often things that have been implemented by a robust business led by a really great leader, that they know that's a proven reason that this will work. So we see that every single meeting. We'll have epiphanies for members in every single meeting. And sometimes it's even when, we have expert speakers who come in and present to our groups, but, they can bring ideas that people just have not even considered. And it might be the kernel of the idea that then enables them to take on new ideas and new things and deal with the challenges that are ahead. Because, to be honest with you, doing business in 2024, it's tricky, right? There's so many challenging things, and often when I hear about how people are solving issues and challenges with innovative ideas, when I hear that, I think, man, I couldn't believe what Ingrid told me today about how she fixed that. I've just got to tell Jason, right? That will solve his problem. So a problem shared is a problem halved in many ways, and the same if you flip it. It's not always negative. There's also opportunities that we could do things better, and so I guess that's how LTT, the Leadership Think Tank, does it. It's a melting pot of great ideas, and a chance for leaders to really distill that into making their best decisions.
Yes. From what I understand, it absolutely is a melting pot where leaders can explore great ideas and also take time to think about the implementation of those ideas in a very practical way, which, when you're busy running a business, you don't often set aside that time for yourself. So it creates a forum for that. Yeah.
It bludgeons a CEO into spending some time on being available for strategic thinking. Like, I got to tell you, there's so many times I've met a business owner or a CEO or an MD in another organisation. I've talked about what we do, and they say, "Look, I love the idea. I just don't have time." And I say, honestly, if you don't have half a day a month to lift yourself above the clouds and look at what other businesses are doing and doing well, and talk to some other CEOs about better ways of your doing, are you honestly telling me you don't have half a day to invest in your own strategic benefit? For mine, they're the perfect member. People who tell me I don't have time to do that, I say, you are exactly the kind of person that would benefit from what we do. Because if you can't take half a day out of your business, what happens when you break your leg? What happens when you get sick? What happens when you can't get into work? What happens when you're not there? And if you're running a business that determines you have to be available 100% of the time, you are not running the kind of business that you should be.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's just so many analogies for that. They say that if you don't take time, to look after your health when you're well, life finds a way of making sure that you do.
Yeah,
You know, it
absolutely.
can be hard when you're sick. And the other analogy that I think of there is, you know, that time for meditation. You know, if you don't have 1 hour for meditation, you obviously need two. You know, so you know, it's
Yeah.
kind of a similar analogy around that. So, I want to come to the sales revolution now, and one of the things that I think is going to enable businesses to really go forward, not only in the current environment that they're facing at the moment with all of the challenges that you've outlined, Jason, but going into the future, because I don't think that a lot of these challenges are going to go away in the short term, particularly from what one of the leading economists said last year was about the talent shortage lasting 10 years, which kind of made my hair curl a little bit. But
Yeah.
I talk with the Sales Revolution about businesses creating a culture of customer and having customer consciousness. What do these concepts mean to you? And can you kind of think, you know, across your vast level of experience, some of the companies that perhaps best represent this kind of philosophy of either a culture of customer or a customer consciousness?
Okay, so a culture of customer really, well, every business, like let's be honest, every business should have the customer at the forefront of their mind. I mean, it is the reason they exist, because it's not, you know, unless they're doing something academic that is not necessarily dealing with customers. If you're not looking after and nurturing your customer base, then somebody else will, and you'll learn that pretty quickly. For mine, if every important decision you're making in a business is not being viewed through the prism of what the impact on your customer will be, and it's only on the impact of, you know, looking at how it's going to improve your business or the processes that you might do, you think internally this will be a great result. But if you haven't then thought about the impact that's going to have on your customer, then you are not utilizing the opportunity there to make the best decisions. For us, when we do things, like every decision that I make in LTT, every decision I make is with a member opportunity. Like if we do this, we make these changes, what will be the impact on members? And I regularly bounce ideas about how I'm running the business off long-term members, people who've been customers of ours for a long period of time, and I talk about things and they either go, that's a really great idea, or they go, why would you do that? Because that would impact us in a way that might not work. Now, if you are not prepared to focus on the customer as the most important reason that you're in business, then I don't think you'll have a business that will operate at the highest level. If I reflect on some businesses which you asked that are doing it really well, maybe one or two come to mind. So look, there is a business called SASH, the Small Animal Specialist Hospital here in Sydney. It's a vet hospital. It's one of Australia's leading one, and they've got a chain of hospitals now throughout a number in Sydney and a couple interstate. And SASH is a remarkable business. It was started by 4 vets in about 2005. But as it's grown and matured and is now an incredibly sophisticated business with, I think, about 800 employees and about 7 different sites across Australia. But they had I'm trying to remember, they had their motto was helping pets and their families live their best life. That's their kind of mission statement. And if you think about that, the reason they're doing that, the reason that is important is because it's all about the customer. It's all about the pet. It's all about the owners of the pet, the families of the pet, right? These incredibly important parts of your family. And even though SASH is working with highly skilled professionals in often very, emotionally draining situations, their focus is always about the customer. It's always about the client, being the pet, and the families that surround that. And I've worked closely with their CEO for a number of years now, and that has just become a real driving force in all that they do. And as a result, the professionals that work within the organisation and It's not just the veterinarians, but the specialist vets as well. The vet nurses or the team have that as their sole focus, that everybody wants to make sure that the clients are looked after. And so all the decisions they make are about, will this deliver better care, right? So that's one example that I've seen has worked incredibly well. I think another has been an organisation called Beaumont People, a recruitment firm here in Sydney, started by Nikki Beaumont maybe 20 plus years ago, and their MD, Nina Mapson-Bone, who left at the end of last year but was a member of my group for a number of years. They had a real focus on their customers as well, and they would donate a proportion of the fee for putting in a new hire back to a charity or an NFP. And I think over a period of time, they would have done millions and millions of dollars in rebates back to organisations. Now, a cynic may say that's just, they've made 90% of profit rather than 100% of profit. Well, that may end up being the case, but the result has been an enormous amount of customer loyalty and an enormous amount of respect throughout the marketplace, with an idea of what the customer is important. We've got a culture of the customer. We want to maintain a great reputation. We want a great relationship with the customer. And as a result, we will actively put our money where our mouth is, and we will benefit the customer as a result. Now, organisations that adapt that as business as usual can then have a big impact on how they are operating internally. So they also not only just did something for their customers, but they did something for the staff. They're one of the first organisations in Australia to introduce a 4-day working week. And it wasn't, we're going to cram 5 days into 4. There was real strategy and KPIs and numbers and reasons behind it. But it was actively about our clients. We are looking after them. To do that, we want to make sure that our employees are as happy and positive as they possibly can be. So that was another element. I think that's two organisations. I think the other thing that comes to mind when I think of having a culture of customer is we have a great speaker called Colin Chodos who talks about the Harvard service profit chain, which is all about investing in employee capability that leads to employee satisfaction and employee productivity and employee loyalty that translates into value to the customer, that leads to customer satisfaction, which in turn leads to customer loyalty, which in turn drives revenue growth and your profitability. But the premise is you start with the employee. You start with the employee capability, because if you can do that and increase the loyalty of your employee, that will increase the loyalty of your customer. So I've seen some organisations that work in that kind of framework, and for mine, that is one of the most remarkable ways that you could impact on your customer loyalty and hence your revenue growth as a result, by focusing on employees and making sure they are having a culture of customer as well.
Well, just 3 fantastic examples there, Jason. Coming right back to SASH, I mean, I really appreciated you highlighting for us about what their mission statement was and how that drives, the question that everyone across that organisation has in their minds, will this deliver better care? And if that's informing every process, every system, every decision, every conversation, every element of that business, how can it go wrong? Because it's really clear there. I really loved too your example with Beaumont People talking about the NFP focus that they also had, and their view of themselves really as members of their communities, and the role that business plays in giving back to different elements of the community, because it's being a good corporate citizen without any of the tick to box, ticket to play world that we live in at the moment. That strikes me as incredibly genuine and probably also very thoughtful in its choice of who they're going to support and when they're going to support. And I don't see any problem with a business being profitable. In fact, it needs to be if it's going to do these wonderful things. And in fact, then it also, doing these other things. And if it has, it's not the reason that I'm sure Beaumont people chose to do that. It doesn't sound like that at all. But if it then comes back around and benefits that business, I think that that's just a bonus, and how can it not? And then the final example that you talked about there was really about that person. Sorry, I missed his name again. What was it?
Colin Chodos.
Colin Chodos, talking about employee productivity and looking after your employees and developing them, because they're a customer of the business. Just like for those employees, the organisation is their customer as well, and one another. Are also the way that we treat anyone as a customer that matters is part of what I talk about in the sales revolution. It all matters and creates a different type of culture, which is the culture of customer. So I really appreciate that breadth of example there that you talked about.
Well, if you also think about like who's an advocate for your business that you've never met, right? I can think of a number of places I've been, like places I've stayed or restaurants I've been to or experiences that I've had that I talk about endlessly with people, right? Someone's going down to Tassie, I tell them to go to stay at this place because I've told dozens and dozens of people, I'm an advocate for this place in Tasmania where I stayed. They have no idea I exist, right? They've got no idea I'm out here talking so positively about my memories and my experience about that. Yeah. Because it was influenced on my experience on the day or the days that we've stayed there and the times we've stayed there, that resonated with me so much. And as a result, I've been an advocate for these organisations for years. So when you think about what's going on in your own business, who are you dealing with? Who are you interacting? That they may go on and talk positively about who you are and what you do, and you have no idea they exist either.
Right. And then you've also got an external sales force that you've never met, who are driving that new business and feeding your pipeline.
Well, I learnt very early on in one of my very first jobs, I was told about the endless chain of referrals, right? So the endless chain of referrals was always about, if you're trying to engage someone to do business with you, but they're not interested, it was about, well, who else do you know? Who else do you know that might be interested in what we did? That was the premise behind it. And I've never forgotten the saying, because what it's about is pretty much you always have a funnel, you always have a pipeline, and the pipeline is at your fingertips. You just have to ask for it. And if I think about the endless chain of referrals, it's a little bit like referring on a business or referring on an experience or referring on a person. There's a tradesman in our local area that has never advertised for work because he comes in, he does a great job, and on these Facebook chat groups or community chat groups is, does anyone know a plumber who will turn up? And everybody pumps in, yeah, this guy, he's never been out of work. Honestly, I think I've put on a third level onto his house by the amount of times I've referred him. But they've got this advocacy thing in the marketplace is one of the key things when it comes to sales. If you've done a really good job and you've left your customer with a great experience, that's not the end of the transaction. Right, that's not the end. That the life of that interaction could be decades long as they talk positively about you and your business. So that's why it's important.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Finally, Jason, I just wanted to ask you about the role that CEOs play in creating a culture of customer in their businesses. Sure. What happens when they either don't have this culture or they're not actively involved in its creation?
Look, Ingrid, I think that if CEOs aren't actively involved in the creation of that kind of culture, then they'll never have a business that could reach the heights that it possibly could. They may be successful, they may do okay, and there are you and I would both know there's organisations that don't have that attitude, but they still make profits and they still employ people and it still goes. But for mine, it's not just about the end result in financial terms, but it's also about the end result in emotional and intellectual and societal terms. Like, what's the impact and the feeling that people have when they've dealt with you? And if it's not a culture, if the CEO has not driven that idea, then it will never be as strong as it possibly could be. So for mine, a really successful organisation that thrives on this culture of customer always has been driven and supported by the CEO. And by that, it's not just paying lip service to it, but they put resources into it. They, not just financial, but people resources, and it's talked about in their strategy meetings, and they're not ashamed by it. In fact, it's out in front. I mean, a little bit like with SAT when they talk about this is what we do. It's important that we have our pets and their families. That's our forefront. That's where we put all our focus. So it's not being driven by the CEO. My personal sense is that it will never be as robust a business or give the greatest kind of three-dimensional result as it may have done otherwise.
Incredible. Jason, I could probably talk to you for another 3 hours, but unfortunately we've both got some other things that we need to do. It has been an honour and a privilege speaking with you today, and I've really been so grateful for all of your insights and all of your experiences that you've shared with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. It's been a pleasure talking to you.